In a quiet corner of the city, where the streets are lined with closed shops and abandoned buildings, there lies an old restaurant with faded signs and cracked windows. Once a thriving place filled with the aroma of freshly cooked meals and laughter, it now stands as a shadow of its former self, empty, desolate, and bankrupt. But what if I told you that this very restaurant became a symbol of compassion in one of the most unlikely of ways? What if the owner, a man who had lost everything, chose to give the little he had left to someone who needed it the most? Let's rewind to a few months ago when the restaurant was still operational. The owner, who had poured his heart and soul into the business, had watched it slowly slip into financial ruin. Despite his best efforts, the once popular eatery couldn't keep up with rising costs, fierce competition, and an ever-decreasing customer base. One by one, employees were let go, bills went unpaid, and finally, the door of the restaurant closed for good. The loss hit hard, not just in terms of money, but also emotionally. This was more than a business to him. It was a dream, a legacy that now felt like it was slipping through his fingers. But amidst the despair and overwhelming weight of failure, something unexpected happened. One cold evening, as the owner sat alone in his office, trying to make sense of his broken dreams, he heard a knock at the door. When he opened it, he saw a man, ragged, dirty, and exhausted, standing on the other side. The man's eyes were dull, his clothes tattered, and his face carried the marks of a life lived in hardship. Yet it was the child by his side that caught the owner's attention. A little girl, no older than 5 or 6, clung to her father's leg, her wide eyes filled with uncertainty. The man introduced himself as a beggar, a survivor of the streets who had spent years trying to find a way to feed his daughter. With no family to turn to and no place to call home, they were now without shelter, wandering the city in search of a safe space to sleep for the night. The owner, despite his own dire situation, saw something in their eyes, an unspoken plea for help. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he found himself doing something that no one could have predicted. With nothing left to lose, he opened the doors to the very restaurant that had failed him, offering it as a place for the beggar and his daughter to stay. A place for them to sleep, eat, and find some temporary peace. It wasn't much, but it was all he had left to give. At first, it seemed like a strange decision. The restaurant, once full of life and energy, was now silent. The only sounds that filled the space were the distant hum of the city and the occasional rustling of the beggar and his daughter. It wasn't a permanent solution, and the owner knew that. But what else could he do? The world outside had been unkind to these two souls, and in his heart, he couldn't bear the thought of turning them away. Days turned into weeks, and as time passed, something remarkable began to happen. The owner, once consumed by his failure and grief, started to feel a sense of purpose again. As he watched the beggar and his daughter settle into their new home, he couldn't help but notice the small joys that began to return to their lives. The little girl would run around the empty dining area, her laughter echoing through the halls. Her father, though still weary, started to help the owner with small tasks, cleaning, and organizing what little remained of the restaurant. But even as hope began to blossom in this unlikely place, the owner knew that their temporary shelter was not enough. He couldn't stay in this state forever, and he certainly couldn't let this family continue to live in a rundown, bankrupt restaurant. The question that haunted him was simple. What was next? How would he manage to give this family a real future when his own was in such turmoil? And that's where the story takes another turn, one that no one could have seen coming. It was one evening when the owner, sitting in the back room of the restaurant, lost in thought about his next move, that a letter arrived. It was from his bank, and as he tore open the envelope, his heart skipped a beat. The letter was not just a notice of further debt. It was a warning, a final ultimatum. The restaurant, his last remaining asset, was now on the verge of being sold to settle his debts. There was no way out, no escape. For a moment, the world seemed to come crashing down on him again. He had nothing left to offer. No hope, no future, no plan. Yet in the midst of this crushing despair, he looked over at the beggar and his daughter, who were now sitting at a table in the corner, enjoying a simple meal together. They had found comfort in a place he had once thought of as a failure. As he stared at them, a new thought began to take root in his mind. Maybe this wasn't just about saving himself. Maybe in some way, this was about saving them all. The question remained, could he really find a way to turn things around, not just for himself, but for the family he had so unexpectedly taken in? With the bank breathing down his neck and the future uncertain, the owner was faced with an impossible choice. Would he let go of everything, including the last shred of his pride, to give this family a chance at something better? Or would he walk away, leaving them to face the harsh realities of the streets once again? The decision that would change their lives forever was just around the corner. But how it would all unfold is something we'll discover in the next part of the story. Stay tuned because the twists and turns are far from over. The days that followed were a blur of tension and uncertainty. The restaurant, once a bustling hub of activity, now felt like a hollow shell, a place where memories of success were slowly being suffocated by the harsh reality of failure. The owner had always prided himself on his work ethic, his dedication to his craft, but now, with the looming threat of losing everything, even his spirit was beginning to falter. He had been close to giving up before, but this time felt different. There was no clear way out. The weight of his debts, the bank's relentless calls, and the fear of losing the restaurant that had been his life's work hung over him like a dark cloud. But even amidst this growing despair, the beggar and his daughter somehow managed to bring a sense of warmth to the cold, empty space. The little girl's innocent laughter as she ran around the dining area, her tiny feet echoing off the tile floors, felt like a reminder of what could still be good in the world. Her father, despite his hardened exterior, began to show signs of gratitude and even hope. They both clung to this strange place as their refuge, their sanctuary, and the owner couldn't help but wonder, had he made the right choice? The beggar, whose name was Harris, seemed to carry a deep sorrow in his eyes, a sorrow that spoke of years of hardship, loss, and survival on the streets. But there was something else too. Despite his circumstances, Harris had an undeniable resilience, a quiet strength that the owner couldn't ignore. The way he took care of his daughter, the way he kept their little corner of the restaurant tidy and safe, told the owner more about the man than words ever could. And then there was his daughter, Zainab, bright, curious, and full of life. She had dreams, even if they were simple ones, to go to school, to have a warm meal every day, to feel safe. But the more the owner observed them, the more he felt the pressure of his own failures weighing on him. He had been unable to provide for his family, unable to keep his business afloat, and now he was barely keeping it together for himself, let alone for them. Yet there was this undeniable pull to help, to do something that could make a real difference in their lives. Every day, as he watched Harris and Zainab settle in, he wondered how he could possibly hold on to the last bit of dignity he had left, while also giving them something to hold on to. The problem was, the bank wasn't waiting for a miracle. They wanted their money, and they wanted it now. The ultimatum in the letter had made that abundantly clear. If the owner couldn't pay off his debts in the next month, the restaurant would be seized, sold, and turned into something else. A fast food chain, a convenience store, or worse, a vacant lot. The thought of seeing the restaurant turned into something else, something soulless, made the owner's heart ache. This place had history. It had memories. And it had given him a chance to make something of himself. Losing it would feel like losing a part of who he was. As the days wore on, he found himself at a crossroads. Should he focus on saving the restaurant, risking everything, or should he let it go and try to start anew? What could he possibly do in the short amount of time left to change the course of his life? It wasn't as if he could simply reopen the doors and hope for customers to flood in. The area was changing. New businesses were taking over, and the once popular spot was no longer the place people flocked to. The owner was no fool. He knew the odds were stacked against him. Yet, as he sat in the dimly lit kitchen one evening, lost in his thoughts, Haris entered the room. The beggar was holding a worn-out notebook in his hands, the pages yellowed and frayed. It was clear this notebook meant a lot to him. He set it down on the counter in front of the owner, his face serious but gentle. "I used to run a small business," Harry said, his voice low. "Back when I had a home. I used to sell fruits, vegetables, anything I could get my hands on. But that was years ago. Now, all I have is this notebook with old plans, ideas, and dreams. I know how to run a business, even if I don't have the means anymore." The owner looked at the notebook, confused but intrigued. What could a beggar, someone who had spent his life struggling to survive, possibly know about running a business? But as he flipped through the pages, he realized that Harris wasn't just talking about selling fruit. There were detailed sketches, notes on marketing, and even financial planning ideas. It was as if Haris had poured his soul into the pages, all the knowledge he had gathered over the years. "This restaurant, it's not just a place to eat," Haris continued, almost as if reading the owner's mind. "It's a place for people to come together. A place to find comfort, to feel like they belong. That's what it was before, wasn't it? That's what you've built." The owner nodded slowly, unsure where this conversation was leading. Haris's eyes gleamed with a spark of hope. "I know you're struggling, but maybe there's something here, something we can do together. Maybe we can turn this place around. Maybe we can build it into something more than just a restaurant. People don't just want food. They want a place to belong, a place to feel at home. What if we gave them that?" For the first time in what felt like forever, the owner felt a flicker of hope. Could Haris, a man who had nothing, really have a solution to his problems? Could a beggar and a broken restaurant somehow become the key to both their futures? But as the owner sat there, considering this impossible idea, the door of the restaurant creaked open. He froze. The bank representative had arrived, unannounced, with a warning that the clock was ticking. There was no more time to think. The pressure was mounting, and the decision had to be made, today. Could the owner risk everything on Haris's dream? Could he trust a man who had been a beggar just days before? As the tension between possibility and reality built up, one thing was clear. The stakes were higher than ever. Time was running out, and with the future of the restaurant hanging in the balance, the owner had to decide whether to trust his instincts or let go of everything. Would this leap of faith bring him salvation or send him spiraling into failure once more? The bank representative stood in the doorway, a stern look on his face, as he surveyed the empty restaurant. The owner felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The pressure of the situation was unbearable. He had been trying to keep his composure, but now, with the representative here and time running out, it all seemed too much. "You know what happens next, don't you?" The representative said, his voice cold and matter of fact. "If the debts aren't settled in the next few days, this place is ours. The sale will happen, whether you're ready or not." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The owner felt the weight of his failure bearing down on him, but as his eyes drifted to Haris, still standing by the kitchen counter, something inside him shifted. The little spark of hope that had flared up earlier now felt like a lifeline. He turned to the bank representative, his voice calm but resolute. "I need more time. I know the situation looks grim, but I think I can turn this around. Just give me one more week." The representative didn't even try to hide his skepticism. "1 week. That's it. After that, we're done." The owner nodded, swallowing hard. As the representative left, closing the door behind him, the silence in the restaurant felt deafening. He turned to Haris, unsure of what to say. "You were serious about that idea, weren't you?" the owner asked quietly. Haris gave a small, determined smile. "I'm serious. We have one shot at this, and it has to be now." With no time to lose, they sprang into action. Haris used his business knowledge to help the owner devise a new plan, one that would not only keep the restaurant afloat, but turn it into something entirely different. They decided to reinvent the place. The idea was simple: a community-centered restaurant, one that offered more than just food. They would host events, cooking classes, and even offer a safe space for local artists to display their work. The aim was to create a warm, welcoming atmosphere, a place where people could come together, share stories, and support each other. But the challenges were immense. They didn't have the money for fancy renovations or marketing campaigns. What they had were their skills, their passion, and the unwavering belief that they could make this work. Haris and the owner worked late into the nights, cleaning, planning, and slowly transforming the space. The little girl, Zainab, would join in too, drawing bright pictures of the new restaurant on the chalkboard in the corner. Her innocence and optimism became a symbol of hope, a reminder of why they were doing this. The first event they organized was a modest one, a simple dinner with live music from a local musician. The owner was nervous. What if no one showed up? What if they failed again? But when the evening arrived, something unexpected happened. People came, not in droves, but enough to fill the tables, to laugh, to enjoy a meal together. Word started to spread about the restaurant's new vision. Slowly but surely, the community began to rally around them. They weren't just offering food, they were offering a chance to belong, to be part of something bigger. By the end of the week, the restaurant had begun to turn a profit. It wasn't enough to pay off all the debts yet, but it was a start. The bank had given them a temporary extension, but the pressure was still mounting. One night, as the owner sat down to review the books, Haris joined him. "We're almost there," Haris said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "You've done it. We've done it." The owner looked up at him, a mix of disbelief and gratitude in his eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you." Harris shrugged modestly. "It wasn't just me. It was you. You believed in something beyond just survival. You gave me and Zainab a chance, and that's what made the difference." The owner smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time in months, he wasn't just struggling to stay afloat. He was building something meaningful, something that could stand the test of time. A few days later, the bank representative returned. This time, his demeanor was different. He looked over the books, nodded slowly, and said, "You've managed to turn this around. It's not perfect, but it's something. You've bought yourself more time." Relief flooded over the owner, but he knew this wasn't the end. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. The restaurant wasn't just his last chance. It was now a symbol of resilience, of second chances. As the days went by, the community continued to support the restaurant, and it slowly became a local favorite once again. People came for the food, yes, but they also came for the sense of belonging it offered. And the owner realized something profound. The restaurant had not only saved him, it had saved all of them. Haris and his daughter had found a home. The owner had found a new purpose. And together, they had created something bigger than any of them could have imagined. Looking back, the owner knew he had faced one of the toughest decisions of his life. It wasn't just about the money or the business. It was about choosing to believe in something when everything else seemed lost. And in that choice, he had found something far more valuable than any amount of wealth could ever offer. A new beginning, a chance at redemption, and the knowledge that even in the darkest of times, there is always room for kindness, hope, and second chances. And as the owner stood at the front of the restaurant one evening, watching the laughter and chatter of the people inside, he couldn't help but smile. This was more than just a restaurant now. It was a home, a place where dreams, no matter how small, could still come true.